My brother snorted. Your kid's not going anywhere in life. The table laughed. Except my son, who went quiet. I just said, good to know. I'll cancel that auto payment for your daughter's art school. My brother stared at me. My mom whispered, let's not ruin the mood. But then it was my mom's 65th, and she'd planned the dinner like it was the royal wedding. We all showed up. Me, my husband Rick, our son Julian, my brother Dave, his wife Mel, their two perfect daughters, and a few extended family members who always knew how to fake a smile and drink just enough wine to say something inappropriate by dessert. The dinner was at some overpriced restaurant downtown. Mom had reserved a private room, probably to make sure the family drama didn't spill into the public eye. Too late. Julian had just turned 13. He's not loud. He doesn't show off. The kind of kid who gets overlooked at family events because he's not desperate for attention like Dave's girls, who never let a single moment pass without reminding everyone how talented they are. One sings, the other dances. They both go to an arts academy that costs more per year than a state college. I pay for that, by the way, quietly every month just to help. Julian, on the other hand, had brought a pen and was sketching on a napkin. He always draws when he's nervous or bored. I could tell it was both. Then came the moment that still plays in my head. Dave leaned back in his chair, smug, drunk on Cabernet and his own self-importance. He looked over at Julian, watched him for a second, then snorted. Actually snorted. Then he said it. Your kid's not going anywhere in life. The table laughed, like he just told a clever joke. You know that kind of brittle laughter people do when they're afraid not to join in. That was it. Except Julian. He stopped drawing. His eyes didn't even blink. I looked straight at Dave and said, good to know. I'll cancel that auto payment for your daughter's art school. It was like dropping a glass and watching it shatter in slow motion. Dave didn't speak. Mel went pale. My mother didn't look at me, just picked up her wine glass and whispered, let's not ruin the mood. But I already had. Or maybe I hadn't ruined it. Maybe I just exposed it for what it was. That night at home, Julian handed me the napkin he'd drawn on. It was the dinner table, all of us. But in his version, half the people had wolf heads. Not cartoon wolves. These were sharp, watchful things with teeth. My brother, my mother, the rest. He hadn't drawn himself. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Then I went to my desk, logged into the tuition portal, and canceled the next payment. Not because of what Dave said, but because of what nobody else said. Rick told me I was being petty. Said Dave was just being a brother, that it was my pride talking. He laughed, actually laughed, and said Julian would forget it by morning. But I couldn't stop looking at that napkin and how the wolves were all smiling. After I canceled the tuition payment, I didn't say anything. I waited. 3 weeks later, Mel texted me. Hey, Lola, weird thing. Looks like the art school tuition didn't go through. Do you think you could check? I stared at the message for a good minute before replying. Not weird. I canceled it. She didn't respond. The next day, Dave called. Straight to the point, like always. Said his card had been declined when they tried to fix it and asked what my problem was. I told him he should probably start handling his own family's finances. He called me bitter. I told him I was just tired of feeding wolves. That's when things started to shift. Small things. Quiet things. My mother suddenly got very into the group text, sending family photos, tagging everyone in pictures from that dinner, like it had been some Hallmark moment. She wrote, "My beautiful family," under every post. Julian wasn't in a single photo. I noticed. I don't think she realized. Then came the birthday party for Dave's youngest. Everyone was invited except us. When I asked my mom about it, she said, "You've been so busy lately. I thought you'd want the weekend free." I told her we had a gift ready and everything. She said to drop it off on the porch. No need to come in. Julian heard that conversation. He didn't say anything, but he quietly took the gift back to his room, opened it, and started playing with it himself. He never asked about his cousins again. I expected Rick to be on my side, at the very least neutral, but one night after dinner, he told me he'd seen Dave at the gym and that Dave looked pretty upset about what I'd done. Said he thought I should be the bigger person and apologize. If not to Dave, then to my mom. I asked him why. He said, because you're making things harder for everyone. So I asked him something I hadn't planned on asking. Did you laugh at the table when Dave said that about Julian? He didn't answer. I think that was the moment I stopped looking at him the same way. After that, I started quietly pulling out of everything. Canceled the cleaning lady I was paying for at my parents' place. Cut off the monthly groceries I'd been covering for my mom since Dad died. Stopped managing the online shop I'd helped Mel set up last year. I didn't send a single message about it, no announcements, just unplugged everything I had been holding up for years. That's when the calls started. First from my mom, pretending not to notice anything. Then voicemails from Mel, each one more awkward than the last. Finally, Dave himself again, this time yelling into the phone that I was trying to punish his daughters for something he said. I didn't respond. But I wasn't finished yet, not even close, because there was one more thing left to deal with. About a week after I unplugged the last thing, Mel's online shop, I got a call from Julian's school. The counselor asked me to come in. Said it was just a casual meeting, nothing urgent. So I went, sat across from her in a bright little office with laminated posters on the walls about mindfulness and kindness. She looked kind, like someone who probably baked for her coworkers and never cursed in traffic. She smiled, but there was tension behind it. She said there had been a concern, nothing official, just that someone had anonymously contacted the school about a possibly unstable home environment for Julian. She emphasized that it wasn't an accusation, just something they felt they needed to follow up on. I asked if Julian had said anything. He hadn't. I asked if he was falling behind in class. He wasn't. Then I asked, "Has anyone else from my family been in contact with the school?" She paused and said she couldn't answer that. That was my answer. I didn't tell Julian right away. There was no point adding more weight on his shoulders. He'd been better lately, lighter. He'd even started painting again. Real painting, not just sketches. His newest one was of a girl made entirely of gears and wires. He called it Silent Power. That night, I brought it up with Rick. I thought he'd be shocked, outraged even. But instead, he just leaned back in his chair, rubbed his face, and said, "Maybe it's time to talk to your family. Clear the air." I asked him what air he thought needed clearing. I told him someone had tried to make it look like I was neglecting our son, and he thought the solution was a coffee chat. He sighed like he was tired of carrying the burden of my reactions. Then he slipped up. He said, "Look, it's not like we didn't already talk about this." That's when it came out. They'd had a meeting. My mom, Dave, Mel, and Rick. At a cafe downtown. Sat around, probably sipping lattes and deciding how to deal with Lola. I wasn't even mentioned until it was time to plan the damage control. Rick said it wasn't a betrayal, said he just wanted to help them understand what I was going through. I asked him what exactly he told them I was going through. He didn't answer. He just said he thought they had a point, that maybe I was going too far, isolating Julian and burning bridges, that maybe I needed to make peace. That was the moment something in me turned off. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just nodded, got up from the table, and for the first time in years, I locked the bedroom door behind me. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Nothing drastic. I just wanted to remove Rick's name from a few accounts, move some money. I told myself it was just preparation. Later that day, Julian taped a new drawing on the fridge. It was a house. Ours. A small one-story thing, drawn in charcoal and soft green pastels. 2 people stood in front of it. A woman and a boy. Everyone else was far off in the distance. Their faces were blurry. At the top, in small block letters, Julian had written one word. Free. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Rick walked past it twice that evening. He never said a word. Maybe he didn't recognize the house. But I did, because it wasn't the one we lived in. Not yet. 2 days after I moved the money, Rick came home with flowers. He hadn't brought me flowers in over a year. He placed them on the counter, kissed my cheek like everything was fine, and said we should go out for dinner. Just the 2 of us. I asked why. He said, "Because we've been tense." I said, "I'm not hungry." He nodded, but I saw the shift in his eyes, like the charm hadn't landed the way he thought it would. That night, I lay awake while he snored next to me, wondering how many times I'd made excuses for him. To my mom, to Dave, to Julian, to myself. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. She said she'd heard from Rick that I'd been feeling overwhelmed and that they were all praying for me. I asked her if she had called the school. She paused just a second too long and said she didn't know what I was talking about. Then she said this, "You've always been so intense, Lola. Even as a little girl, you never knew how to forgive." I didn't respond, I just hung up. That afternoon, Rick got a call from Dave while we were eating lunch. He took it at the table, laughed loudly, then left the room to finish the conversation. Julian glanced up at me once, said nothing, but I saw his hand tighten around his fork. After Rick went to bed, I opened his laptop. I hadn't done that in years. There was no password. I don't know if he forgot to set one or just didn't think I'd ever look. There were messages, dozens of them. Some between him and Dave, some with Mel, some with my mom. They talked about me like I was a project, an unstable variable, someone they had to handle carefully so I didn't burn everything down. They talked about Julian like he was some fragile creature being damaged by my need to win. One message from my mom stood out. It said, "She's punishing us because her kid isn't special." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told Rick I wanted him out of the house by the end of the week. He blinked, laughed like I was kidding, then realized I wasn't. "You'd really blow up our marriage over this?" I said, "I'm blowing it up because you were never on my side, not even once." He tried to argue, tried to say we could go to therapy, take a trip, start fresh. But every word just felt like more static, more waiting. By Friday, he was gone. Not just from the house, but emotionally checked out. He left like someone escaping a mistake. Julian didn't say anything when Rick left. But that night, he sat down beside me on the couch and quietly handed me a folded paper. It was another drawing, just a road stretching ahead, two small figures walking away, bags in hand. The sun was rising in the background. No title, no names, just a quiet message. I knew what it meant, and I knew what had to come next. After Rick left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt honest. Every room had more space in it, like his presence had always taken up more than it should have. Julian didn't ask where he went. He didn't even flinch when I packed up Rick's shoes and dropped them off on the porch for him to collect. I half expected some moment, some silent breakdown, a question in the dark, but there was nothing, just calm. He drew more, not wolves anymore, not houses either. He started making maps, dozens of them. Hand-drawn cities with winding roads and invented symbols. He taped them to his walls. One map had rivers that flowed backward. One was called The Edge of Enough. Another had no labels at all, just roads that twisted around a small black dot in the center. I asked what the dot meant. He said, "That's where we are now." I started building something too, quietly, without consulting anyone. I found a remote logistics coordinator role in New Hampshire. Steady hours, decent pay, no long commutes, no office politics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I accepted it the same day I toured a small two-bedroom rental tucked behind a row of pines outside Concord. The floors creaked, but it had a sunroom. Julian could use it as a studio. I didn't tell anyone we were moving. Not Rick, not my mother, not Dave or Mel. I didn't feel like they had earned that information. One morning, while Julian was at school, I took down every photo in the living room that included Rick's face. Some were wedding pictures. Some were old family Christmas cards. I put them in a box labeled for him, shoved it into the hall closet, and didn't look at it again. My mother called twice that week. I didn't answer either time. Mel emailed me, asking if I could send over the password for the vendor accounts I'd set up for her shop. She said she was locked out and really needed my help. I read the email, then deleted it. Then Dave finally reached out. Subject line, "You win." The message was short, bitter. He said I'd rip the family in half over nothing. Said I was being dramatic and that one day Julian would grow up resenting me for isolating him. That I was punishing people for not applauding a kid who hadn't earned it yet. He ended it with, "Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply because I already knew it was. Julian came home the next day and found me in the living room taping boxes shut. I expected him to ask something. Why now? Where? What about school? But instead, he just sat down and quietly started folding up his drawings. Not all of them. Just the ones he said he wanted to take. The rest he rolled up and slid under his bed. We packed for the next 2 days. Kept it simple. Essentials. Clothes. Art supplies. Kitchen stuff. I let Julian bring 1 box of books and 1 box of tools. He didn't ask for anything else. The night before we left, he knocked on my door. He was holding a new drawing. This one was different. It was a wide open road curving past mountains, with trees that leaned toward a tiny cabin beside a lake. The cabin had smoke rising from the chimney. The path to it had just 2 sets of footprints. He handed it to me and said, "I made this one for real life." At the bottom, he'd written, "Start here." I didn't frame it that night. I folded it once, neatly, and tucked it into the glove compartment of the car we'd be driving out of state the next morning. By the time Rick got the change of address notice in the mail, we were already gone. We left just before sunrise. Julian was asleep in the passenger seat, his hoodie pulled up, headphones on, sketch pad in his lap. The roads were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're sneaking out of something, even if you have every right to go. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I just felt this slow burning calm, like when a storm passes and you realize the roof held after all. The new place was smaller than what we were used to. 2 bedrooms, a slanted roof, a crooked fence in the back that looked like it had given up trying to stand straight. But there was a big pine tree in front, and the sunroom was even better than I remembered, full of windows, light pouring in from every angle. Julian claimed it instantly, spread out his papers, hung his maps. Within a day, it looked like he'd been there for months. We went grocery shopping together, figured out the bus schedule, found a used bookstore 5 blocks away where the owner let Julian pin one of his drawings to the corkboard. We didn't talk about our old life, not once. It wasn't a rule, it just didn't come up. A few weeks in, Julian asked about Rick. We were unpacking the last few boxes in the kitchen. He said it like someone mentioning a movie they once watched. Not sad, just curious. I told him, "Your dad's going to be very busy for a long time. He might not be around much." Julian just nodded and said, "Okay." Then he pulled out a mug from the box labeled Fragile and set it on the shelf. It was Rick's favorite mug, one I'd forgotten to give back. Julian didn't notice. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. I thought there'd be fallout. Some last-ditch effort from my family to pull me back in. But they went quiet, like they couldn't figure out how to react to someone who didn't need them anymore. The last message I ever got was a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was low. She said she hoped I'd come to my senses, that families fight and I'd taken things too far. Then she said, "Dave misses you." I deleted it, not because it made me angry, but because it felt pathetic. Months passed. I watched Julian grow into the space around him. He joined a small robotics club at the local library, made 2 friends who liked building things out of scrap. He started smiling without looking over his shoulder. One night, as we were eating takeout on the floor of the living room, no dining table yet, he looked up and said, "You know what's funny?" I said, "What?" He said, "I think this is the first place I've ever felt real." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him and nodded. That night, I opened the glove compartment and took out the drawing, the one with the cabin and the 2 sets of footprints. I framed it and hung it by the front door, so every time we leave the house, we see it. And every time we come home, we know exactly where